From the St. Louis Public Radio Newsroom, this is The Gateway. It's Tuesday, March 11th. I'm Abby Larico. The Trump administration's cuts to the federal workforce have left tens of thousands of people without a job. It also has some college students worried about their career prospects.
There were a lot of students that were like, well, why should I even continue down this road?
We'll visit Missouri atmospheric science students who are seeing a major potential employer cut its workforce. That's coming up after this news on The Gateway. Legislation placing the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department under state control is possibly one vote away from becoming law. The Senate approved the bill yesterday. St. Louis Public Radio's Sarah Kellogg has the details.
The Missouri Senate voted 27-5 in favor of legislation that would place the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department under a state-appointed board. Senators spent nearly 10 hours last week negotiating before reaching a compromise. Part of that compromise requires the appointees to earn Senate approval before they can serve on the board. Both St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones and Police Chief Robert Tracy have spoken against the legislation. Jones's office issued a statement criticizing the vote, saying, quote, "I cannot and will not sit down and allow this complete disregard for democracy to compromise the safety of our residents for political gain. Because the Senate made changes to the House bill, it now goes back to the House. If the House passes the bill as is, it then goes to Governor Mike Kehoe, who has made state control of the department a priority." In Jefferson City, I'm Sarah Kellogg, St. Louis Public Radio.
A Missouri House committee approved a large utility bill yesterday. SB 4 includes major changes to how utilities can operate. Consumer advocates say those changes would be too expensive for customers. But business groups and utility representatives say more electricity is needed to meet demand. Warren Wood is Ameren Missouri's regulatory vice president.
The key criterion that's not met is the broad capacity to bring these customers to the state. They very much want to be here. We have good low electric rates. They see the reliability on the system, and they want to be here, but they're saying, when are you going to have the capacity online?
The bill now heads to the House. The Missouri Senate has already passed it. A Republican lawmaker wants Missouri voters to make a big change to legislative term limits. St. Louis Public Radio's Jason Rosenbaum reports on why State Representative Peggy McGaugh says the current system hasn't worked as intended.
Missourians approved a constitutional amendment in 1992 placing 8-year term limits on serving in the Missouri House and Missouri Senate. McGaugh's ballot item, if approved by voters, would allow someone to serve up to 16 years in either chamber. McGaugh says that term limits empower lobbyists and sap the General Assembly of institutional memory.
So I think if people had the ability to stay longer, that they would be better prepared for what's in front of them.
McGaugh's proposed constitutional amendment won House committee approval last week without opposition. I'm Jason Rosenbaum, St. Louis Public Radio.
A bill introduced in the Illinois legislature would prohibit schools from using mascots that are discriminatory against people with disabilities. St. Louis Public Radio's Will Bauer reports the bill's sponsors are hoping to change the mascot at a Metro East high school.
Freeburg High School has used the term midgets for 90 years. It started after a successful undersized basketball team. But little people who have dwarfism find the mascot offensive. Rachel Worley is the founder of the advocacy organization Mascots Matter. She says Freeburg's mascot is dehumanizing.
We are human beings. We are mothers. We are people who show up and get things done. We worry about the economy. We are normal people, and we are treated like something different, and we don't want that anymore.
This bill would require public schools to phase out the mascots by September 2028. However, supporters say being forced to change their mascot isn't right, and they hope to keep it as long as they can. I'm Will Bauer, St. Louis Public Radio.
The local union representing St. Louis Public Schools teachers has endorsed 3 candidates for the district's Board of Education. American Federation of Teachers Local 420 announced yesterday that they are supporting current board president Tony Cousins and candidates Brian Marston and Terry Powers. Marston has 2 children enrolled in the district and has called for more support for the city's homeless students. Powers is a former Democratic committee member and has said she wants to see the district address the social and emotional well-being of children. The election is scheduled for April 8th. Voters can read more about all 12 candidates on the ballot at stlpr.org. The mother of a student shot and killed at Central Visual and Performing Arts High School is seeking approval of a partial settlement with St. Louis Public Schools for the wrongful death of her daughter. Alexandria Bell succumbed to fatal gunshot injuries during a shooting at the school in October of 2022. SLPS says they are not liable for Bell's death. However, the district did make a pre-suit offer to settle the claims for an undisclosed amount. The settlement does not mean the district would admit it was at fault. The troubled Homer G. Phillips Memorial Hospital in North St. Louis has a week to fix problems and get the state's approval for it to keep its license. St. Louis Public Radio's Sarah Fenton reports the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services will need to sign off on the 3-bed facility's plan.
According to DHSS, state officials will need to inspect the hospital by March 17th for it to retain its license. The small hospital opened in January last year and closed 11 months later after a state inspection found it had an inadequate blood supply. The hospital's operators in December furloughed employees. Then in February, they sent workers emails saying their positions had been eliminated. Former employee Talisa Smitty says she hasn't heard anything from the hospital since then.
Be open and honest. The ending, the outcome will probably be much more better than the way this ended now, regardless if you're open or not. Maybe a lot of people wouldn't be so upset, disappointed, and bitter.
Hospital officials did not respond to requests for comment. I'm Sarah Fenton, St. Louis Public Radio.
KDHX has filed for bankruptcy. Leaders of the community radio station filed court papers yesterday seeking Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, which would allow the financially imperiled station to negotiate with creditors under court supervision. The KDHX board recently refused an offer of up to $200,000 in donations that also called for new station leadership. A station lawyer said in court last month that KDHX had less than $7,000 in cash at the time. A predominantly black Catholic church in St. Louis has received a $500,000 grant to help preserve its stained glass windows. As St. Louis Public Radio's Andrea Henderson reports, the grant comes through the National Trust for Historic Preservation's African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund.
St. Alphonsus Liguori Catholic Church in North St. Louis was built in 1867. It's better known as the Rock Church. Over the years, it survived a 5-alarm fire and weather events, and its 120-year-old decorative windows desperately need restoration. Parishioners see the windows as artwork that tells the story of Jesus. Father Rodney Olive is the church's acting priest. He says older black churches are struggling financially, and the recent grant funding is an answered prayer.
If we can make a church like the Rock and maintain it and keep it beautiful, we can make everything else on the north side equally as beautiful.
The church also is raising $1.5 million to help with infrastructure repairs. I'm Andrea Henderson, St. Louis Public Radio.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, fired 800 employees earlier this month. Experts are warning that cuts to the agency could have serious impacts on weather forecasts and climate research. As Harshawn Ratanpal reports, University of Missouri students are grappling with what cuts to the agency mean for their careers.
A handful of students are donning black goggles as they step into the cave. That's CAVE, a computer-assisted virtual environment, and they're wearing virtual reality glasses. The students are participating in an interactive storm simulation. Their professors taking them on a virtual trip through the atmosphere along color-coded conveyor belts carrying warm and cold air, creating clouds, wind, and rain.
And if you look up, you can see
it's not what class looks like every day, but for these students, it's a welcome change of pace. It was just a few days ago that hundreds of federal employees in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration were fired.
I'm heartbroken.
That's MJ Slutter, a junior studying meteorology. Like many students, she's worried that her career plans to join the federal weather workforce have been ruined.
I'm not really certain what I'm supposed to do now.
Since taking office in January, President Donald Trump's administration has fired thousands of federal employees, including an estimated 6% of NOAA's workforce. One of its primary functions is forecasting weather through the National Weather Service.
I think that's going to be a huge problem when we get active severe weather events that come through the country and National Weather Service offices are not not staffed enough to provide those important warnings and weather information to the public.
That's Eric Aldrich, Slutter's professor. The morning after the news broke, he had a 10 a.m. class with upper-level atmospheric science students.
There were a lot of students that were like, well, why should I even continue down this road? My hopes and dreams of working to help save lives and property has just been thrown out the window.
Sophomore Tyler Bucker has wanted to work at the National Weather Service since he was 7. Now he's not sure if that will be possible.
I think my plan as of right now is to just stay in school. I've planned on getting my master's anyways and been thinking about PhD after that. Initially, I was going to, if I could, go into the National Weather Service after my master's.
Many students are thinking about their backup plans, such as focusing on their minor or getting certificates to diversify their skill set. That was the advice given by Patrick Market, the director of the MU School of Natural Resources. He urged students to continue their studies, but sees they're filled with apprehension and disappointment.
The National Weather Service is, today, anyway, a primary employer of atmospheric scientists.
At least one current MU graduate student was fired from a Missouri NOAA office. They didn't want to talk to KBIA and say they're still processing the news.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1
Back in the cave, the simulation is ending, and Aldrich asked the students how they would rate it. They say seeing the 2D models from the classroom come to life in a 3D projection helps better understand them. The cave and other virtual reality projects are used by multiple departments at MU. One research team is using VR to teach cybersecurity to people with neurodevelopmental differences, such as autism. Many of these projects, including the cave, are funded through National Science Foundation grants. Because of federal funding shifts and university budget cuts, both the students and these grants now see clouds on the horizon.
You guys can step on out.
I'm Harshawn Ratanpal.
That story comes to us from member station KBIA in Columbia. The Gateway is a production of St. Louis Public Radio, a listener-supported service of the University of Missouri-St. Louis. Music by Ryan McNeely of Adult Fur. I'm Abby Larico, and from the St. Louis Public Radio newsroom, this has been The Gateway.